piece, and I understand that you're dealing primarily with the male perpetrators of domestic violence and et cetera. But what are some of the causes, and what can we do about this as an issue?
You know, a lot of people think and believe that if a person is abusing substances, alcohol or drugs, that is the cause of domestic violence. Or perhaps if a man grew up in a home where there was family violence, then that's the reason he then becomes a perpetrator. Those are common sort of misconceptions with respect to the actual cause. Those are definitely correlations. We know that substance abuse does exacerbate the problem of domestic violence, and certainly this is a learned behavior that gets passed on from one generation to the next. But the bottom line for all those that have this problem is that there's a need that they cannot control to control and have power over another person. And that's the issue focus that we work with them in our program on.
To have power and control over another person, that seems like an extraordinary cause for domestic violence. Explain that. Are we suggesting that perhaps if a person recognized that they had that need, that perhaps they would not become involved in domestic violence, or what?
I'm not sure that it's insight alone that can lead one to the complete path of rehabilitation. I always think that that's a key, and a lot of the men that we work with don't realize, I mean, at least their awareness is not to the point where they understand that pushing and shoving and tripping and kicking are forms of violence. In some cases, those are such a part of their family system and the milieu that they're in that that's just taken for granted. That's just how you are in a relationship. So one of the first things that we do is to raise their awareness about what this particular problem is. But I think it goes a step further, and that's the societal aspect, that this problem occurs because for centuries, men have been allowed to get away with this, and in fact have been encouraged. So much of the male identity is based on, if you're a real man, that means you're in control. And at least, if you're not in control anywhere else, you better be in control in your home. So it's that message about what it means to be a male in a family situation that perpetuates this. And society gives us those messages about what our roles are.
Now, Sgt. Wynn, what have you found in terms of going out, and I would imagine that you've had a multitude of house calls in reference to domestic violence and et cetera. What do you find in terms of this power kind of relationship?
I agree 100%. It is a power and control thing. I've been on calls where we had hostage situations. I think around 70% of our hostage takings in Davidson County are directly related to family violence. It's about power and control. The stalking cases, which you hear more and more about, the Sherrod case at Captain D's, the recent homicide, he stalked her and then he finally found her and they killed her. This is about power and control, and when a person who is out of control cannot control someone else, they do desperate things. And we've seen that. It's a dangerous call for a policeman to go on, but if it's a dangerous call for me to go on, just think how dangerous it is for that family. The lethality in that family is just unbelievable of what could happen. Around 50% of the men that we arrest also abuse their children too. So you've got a lot of crime being committed in these homes that we're trying to get into and trying to make some sense of, and trying to hold people accountable, which is a real key. If you hold people accountable, you send a message not only to that offender, but you send a message to the victim and you send a message to the children who may be the batterers of tomorrow, that this is wrong behavior, you shouldn't do it, and there's a consequence for what you do.
As a matter of fact, when we go into the family, what we're saying is that the level of violence, if we could eliminate family violence and domestic violence, we stand a very good chance of eliminating quite a bit of violence in society.
Oh, I agree with you 100%. As a matter of fact, not recently, we heard a speech from Janet Reno, the new Attorney General, who said that she believed that most of the crime in America is born in the home filled with family violence. And I've said that for years. I do believe that one of the reasons that we have violent behavior and kids acting out violently in school is because they've learned to be violent at home because violence works. Young boys around the age of 5 years old begin to identify in a home filled with family violence that violence does work. So I'll try it whenever I want to control somebody. So that's the process of the cycle of violence, they call it, that they take with them throughout their life.
And peace, of course, is concerned with trying to break that cycle. Now, what are some of the things that you do, Ms. Cannon, in terms of dealing with that?
one of the things that we do is to also focus on those abuses which continue to perpetuate the power and control when one isn't using violence. And those are an array of behaviors such as emotional abuse, calling names, doing those sorts of things, economic abuse, using money to abuse, controlling all of the funds, not sharing equally with those decisions, using the children, threats and intimidation. If there has been violence, oftentimes all one has to do is to pose the threat of future violence, and the woman will comply because she doesn't want to be once again confronted with another
These are
incident.
threats and intimidations.
Yes. So there's a whole group of other behaviors that we work with. Once the men, usually court-ordered, sometimes volunteering to come into our program, there's usually, they know there's a system out there, a criminal justice system, which is telling them, no, you cannot do this, you've already gone to court once, there will be further consequences if you're violent again. So then some of these other forms of controlling behaviors, like the emotional abuses and isolation and those things, are used even more than they have been because he knows that he's had to give up the violence. So he's trying to maintain the control and the power by using these other forms of behaviors. So we work on all of those.
So let's talk threats and intimidation and emotional violence and all of those things that really do not require a person to strike another person. But at the same time, these are methods whereby people attempt to control other people. And are we saying that in many instances they don't recognize that that's a form of violence? Is that what we're saying?
I think that they probably